All right, sounds good. Well, thanks for showing up, everyone. And it's okay if we have like a smaller info session that makes it like a little bit more personal. We can like talk more, like get a more one-on-one feel. But my name is Shihun Moon. I'm a recent alumni from the department. I graduated in 2019, and I'm currently a PhD student at Georgia Tech. And today I'll be giving a chemical and biomolecular engineering grad school info session for Georgia Tech. So just so to give you a little recap, I guess I half said this stuff, but I graduated in 2019, so a couple years ago, and I'm now a second year PhD student at Georgia Tech. My advisor is Dr. Hong Lu, and I work in microfluidics, so at the intersection of chemical engineering, microfluidics, and neuroscience. I'd love to talk more about that research if you're interested, one-on-one, offline. But today, what I'll be doing is giving you a Georgia Tech CHB info session and a general outline of the slides that I've prepared today. I do have slides, but the main focus today is just going to be answering whatever questions that you have for me, like one, as a Georgia Tech PhD student, but also two, as a fellow recent graduate who's applied to grad schools. So like you can ask me questions about like Georgia Tech specifically, but also questions that aren't necessarily Georgia Tech specific, just grad school in general. Like I'd be absolutely more than happy to answer. Please ask questions at any time. If you can, like interrupt over mic and feel comfortable doing that, absolutely, that's fair game. Otherwise, toss them out in the chat and I'll have Daniel interrupt me for you. But yeah, so ask questions anytime, and the three main things that I'll run through are a program overview, an overview of life at Georgia Tech, and the degree structure. So the way that I've broken it up like this is program overview is kind of stuff that I thought about a lot when I was applying to grad schools, whereas life at Georgia Tech was something I thought more about once I had actually gotten in. And then degree structure is something that I didn't really think about until I actually ended up going there. But I'm going to mention all of these because all of these things are things that make Georgia Tech different from other grad programs that you'd go to. So all of these are good things to think about when you're thinking about a place to apply. But main thing is we'll just get started with the program overview right now. And I can't really give you an idea of like specifically what kind of GPA or like other stats that you'll need to get into Georgia Tech because we do have a holistic admissions process. I'll just go a little bit more into my personal story. So I graduated in 2019. I graduated with distinction, and I was also inducted into Tau Beta Pi when I was here. If you want, like I can tell you my specific GPA like one-on-one, but if you really have questions with your GPA, I'd also recommend asking a faculty that like you're close enough with to ask for like letters of recommendation. But the point that I want to get across here is that yes, I did do well while I was here at Minnesota, but my GPA was absolutely not perfect. I know at least 10 people that graduated with better GPAs than me that first year. So if you have like a couple of Bs on your transcript, absolutely do not be discouraged. I still got into Georgia Tech with those grades. And for the research experience that I had going to Georgia Tech, I did 3 years of undergraduate research with Professor Ferry. And as a result of those 3 years of research, I did not get any publications, which is something that I was a little bit worried about going into grad school applications. But I did present 2 posters at AIChE national conferences, which is like where that bottom photo is from. And I also gave 3 additional posters at local symposiums. So things like the undergraduate research symposium here, or a couple of other local conferences. So again, like this is a fairly deep research record, but not necessarily the strongest. Like publications are missing, and I only worked for 1 advisor. So I was kind of worried that maybe like my letters of recommendation weren't going to be as deep or strong because I was missing like a couple of additional research references. Ended up not being a problem. I got 2 other recommendation letter writers from a couple of grad level courses that I took. So this is my story, and this is just my own story. If I brought like a couple more students or a couple more of my classmates at Georgia Tech right now, they'd probably tell you very different pathways of how you got to grad school. The main thing that I want to stress is that, like, yes, you do have to do well. You do not have to be perfect. And if you have questions about your specific stats, like, I'd be more than happy to talk with you. And I'm sure that the professors that you'd consider asking for letters would be more than willing to talk with you too. So that's just my personal story. And then I'll go into just some like general program stats. So we are currently, according to US News, the 5th ranked graduate chemical engineering program, and then 8th graduate engineering program overall. So that means that you're going to have access to world-class facilities, world-class resources. We have 42 faculty that are currently advising graduate students within our department, which means that we have approximately 200 graduate students overall and about 40 per cohort. So like that's what we call a class year of graduate students that comes in. So big department, lots of opportunities. And here's just like pictures of all of those graduate faculty. And our research is highly diverse. So we split it up into 4 core areas. We have biotechnology, complex systems, energy and sustainability, materials and nanotechnology. But another key thing that I'd like to stress is that all those advisors that I just showed you, they all fall under multiple research areas. So this is a really good program. And like one of the things that I really liked about this was that there is a lot of interdisciplinary work going on, and that it's a really good program for someone who has multiple interests. So if you are, for Professor Ferry, I worked with her on materials and nanotechnology. My current research is closer to biotechnology, but because I went somewhere like Georgia Tech, I was able to explore advisors in both of those areas that I had interest in, and ultimately went into biotechnology, which is different than my undergrad area. So we also have several initiatives for diversity and equity, for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So a lot of these are through our collaboration with the Center for Engineering Education and Diversity. So these are various recruitment initiatives that we have. And then as part of this, I'd also like to pitch an opportunity that I just got the info on. It's called the Georgia Tech Focus Program. So what it is, it's a 2-day virtual grad school recruiting weekend for with an emphasis on historically underrepresented minorities in STEM, design, and business. The program itself is January 15th through 2021, but the application deadline is November 15th, and it's targeted towards juniors and seniors with high academic standing. And the opportunities that connects you with are the ability to get help with your graduate applications, meet one-on-one with faculty, meet one-on-one with recent alumni of Georgia Tech, and network with over 300 plus peers that get invited to this weekend. And in addition to recruitment, there's also an emphasis on diverse and on retention through these various programs that we have. And another cool thing that we have at chemical and biomolecular engineering is Georgia Tech AIChE. So it's an ACS bridge site, which we want to use to increase the number of underrepresented minority PhD students in the chemical scientists. So specifically, we're using the masters in chemical engineering to transition people from non-chemical engineering BSs to a chemical engineering PhD. And if you have some friends in chemistry or some other sciences that might be interested in transitioning into chemical engineering, please tell them about this program, and they can find more information at the URL linked. So just to give you a recap, like, you don't need to be perfect. Applications are reviewed holistically. And to help us do this, we actually dropped the GRE in this most recent application cycle. And my application definitely wasn't perfect. My stats definitely weren't perfect, but I still got into Georgia Tech. Lower ranked programs rejected me, so apply to a wide range of programs, and don't be afraid to apply ambitiously. We do rolling admissions, with the final deadline being in January 1st. But in general, if you are really interested in a program, it is good to try and at least submit a couple weeks in advance, since we do start looking at application. Research in the program is highly diverse. There's a lot of opportunities, and we have a really big program, which is one of the reasons that I liked to, which is one of the reasons that I applied to Georgia Tech too. And we have several initiatives to recruit and retain a diverse community. So with that, I think I'll just throw a pause in here and see if anyone has any questions.
So when it comes to research versus something like industry experience, is there one that's valued more than the other?
I had friends that did internships during undergrad. Like I personally did undergraduate research through all of my summer experiences, but I have friends that definitely did time in industry too, like through internships.
Thank you.
Yeah, like I think the biggest common denominator between like all of my friends is that like currently at Georgia Tech is that like we all did have some undergraduate research experience. And all right. Anyone else, or
Is there also, I know when we come from like high school to undergrad, there's this expectation of like well-rounded, extracurriculars and stuff like that. Is that an expectation here too?
for my PhD application, the strategy that I took was just I think you're asking about the personal statement, probably, like that's where it would be the most applicable. But in general, for grad school, like we look specifically at your ability to be a researcher, or at least that was the assumption that. Well, I should be careful, and like I don't actually review grad school applications. Faculty do that, but the assumption that I used when I was writing my grad school applications was that my ability as a researcher was the most important. So I wrote about my research experiences and like my grade and like the classes that I took. And that ended up like it worked out for me. Like I didn't have to write an essay about like how well rounded I was or anything like that. The personal statement that I turned in was solely about like my research experiences. And okay. So I think I'll go on to the next section of the presentation then, if no one has, or if there aren't any questions, any further questions at this time. So my next section is about life at Georgia Tech. So I think like the biggest thing that people want to know when they want to know about the life ed program is the sense of community that you have there. Is it a competitive program? Because some of the very high ranking programs can tend to be competitive. And my answer to this, like my experience has been just flat out no. During your first semester, you take 4 really hard classes together with all of your classmates. You share the same struggles, the same schedule. It really builds a strong sense of connection, and it builds a strong sense of community outside of the lab. And then the shared experience that you have as a first year cohort, it carries over even once you get into your research lab. And your more senior peers who've had this experience too, like they also, as a result, are very collaborative. So I think this just builds a really good sense of community at our program here. That's what I've experienced. And some fun things that we do as a result of this. So informally, we just like would plan end of semester get-togethers. That was obviously pre-COVID, but even after COVID, we've been getting virtual social hours together through our chemical engineering graduate students, and through our graduate student chemical engineering student group, which is called AIChE, so the Association of Chemical Engineering Graduate Students. That's a graduate student organization in our department, and they lead some different professional development, mentoring, and community service, or mentoring initiatives, help build a sense of community and service. So that's the sense of community. And then in terms of living in Atlanta, it's a really big city. There's a lot of things to do, especially compared to Minneapolis. Like moving to Atlanta makes me realize like how small of a city Minneapolis is. But some things about Georgia Tech are, I'm not going to read through all these quick facts, but the main thing that I want to just show you here is that Georgia Tech is actually directly in the heart of Atlanta. Like it's right in the middle of downtown. It's not out in a suburb somewhere. And the nice thing about that is that you'll be really close to Georgia Tech. If you come to Georgia Tech, you'll live really close to campus. And as a result, you'll be close to a lot of the things that are in Atlanta, since Georgia Tech is right in the heart of Atlanta. And while Atlanta is a very big city, it's also a very green big city. So it's not like you're never going to see trees or a park. So just to give you like a Google Maps view, like in a lot of these other cities or urban areas, you can very clearly see where the city is and then where it ends based on like the green spaces. In Atlanta, it's a little bit harder. And it would be kind of cheap if I just showed you like the Google Maps view of the green spaces, but these are actually some different places that I've been while I was here. So these first 2 pictures are the Atlanta Botanical Gardens, which are in Piedmont Park, which is sort of like the Central Park of Atlanta. Or like if you're familiar with Central Park in New York City, Piedmont Park is something similar, but for Atlanta. And then this last picture on the right is the Chattahoochee River, which is like 7 or 10 minutes away from where my apartment, where I live right now. And the cost of living in Atlanta. So transportation, car is the major source of transportation, but otherwise in general, cost of living is low. A couple of key exceptions are car insurance and rent. But in general, I find the stipend that I've gotten here to be pretty reasonable. Like I can make a living off of it. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about like all of the great food options. It just seemed a little bit tone deaf to list all of the great restaurants that are here, but there's also a lot of good international grocery stores. I've gotten a lot more into Korean cooking, for example, like now that I've moved down here to Atlanta. So just to give you a recap, there is a really good sense of community and cohort that I found here at Georgia Tech. It's very collaborative and supportive just based on the way our curriculum is structured. We have a student group that helps further build and sustain that sense of community. Georgia Tech is centrally located in Atlanta, so you're going to have a lot of things to do, but it doesn't mean you're going to be away from green space. And you'll also have access to a very diverse set of cultures and foods. Cost of living, I think it's low overall, with a couple of key notable exceptions being rent and car insurance.
I actually had a question once you talked about cost of living. You also mentioned a stipend.
Mm-hmm.
So is that based, is that an offer that's given based on like academic, what am I saying?
So for like grad school, like we all get paid the same salary. So it's just a uniform compensation. Granted, at Georgia Tech, we do have this thing called like a President's Fellowship. So like out of like the top 10% of applicants just to Georgia Tech, like the Georgia Tech Institute wide, so not just specifically our program, there's this thing called the President's Fellowship that will like give you a little bit more stipend. But other than that, it's not like scaled individually from person to person. I will say like there is one good thing that I know that I know sorry, excuse me. There is one good thing specifically that I know that Georgia Tech does, where we actually raise grad stipends by 3% every year. So it's not like you're going to start with a stipend that's decent, and then all of a sudden rent's going to go up and you're not going to be able to live off of it by the time you graduate. Like they actually plan in a 3% increase in rent grants around that. But all right, I guess I'll move into the last section then. So the last section, this is the degree structure. So this is something that actually varies or can vary a lot, at least in the first couple of years across PhD programs. And this is something that you don't really think about a lot when you're applying to graduate schools, but I think it's it's a good thing to consider. Like it's maybe not groundbreaking in terms of considering to apply to one place or another, but it can be a good way to decide if you're kind of between two places that are similar. So the outline of the way things work here at Georgia Tech is that in your first semester, you'll go through advisor selection and core courses, and those are the major milestones that you complete. And then the January after, so right at the start of your first semester, or right at the start of your second semester, you take your qualifying exam and you start research. And then in your second year, in general, in the second year, you defend your PhD proposal. So your first fall, you go through advisor selection and you also take your classes. So for advisor selection, Georgia Tech admits you to the program. We don't handpick you for a specific research group. So that's nice because you get the flexibility to think more about what you want and choose what's going to be best for you in the coming 5 years. It's a very student-focused way of picking projects. And the process for this is that you'll get a list of funded projects. And then based on the projects that look interesting, what I did was I met with the faculty that were sponsoring the project, several of their students, and after going through a few rounds of meetings, I submitted a list of my top choices for faculty advisors. And then faculty start deciding based on the preferences that you submit, like around October. So within the first month, it happens pretty quickly, but it's nice because it gives you flexibility to choose what you want to work on. And then while this is going on, your first semester, you're just taking a lot of classes. So like that first semester, I felt like I was a super undergrad or undergrad plus plus semester. It's transport, kinetics, thermo, math modeling, seminar, and a couple of like other little seminars sprinkled in. It's hard to really start research in that semester, which is annoying because that's kind of what you go to graduate school to do. But advisors understand this. They don't really, in general, they don't really expect you to actually be doing research. They just want you to focus on those core classes and do well. And then our qualifying exam and is a little bit different at Georgia Tech, especially in the sense that it's different from the PhD proposal. So I think a lot of programs, I think this is the way that it works at Minnesota, but or at least it seemed to work at Minnesota. The two would be sort of coupled together. Whereas at Georgia Tech, they're separate, and this allows the qualifying exam to happen very quickly. So the qualifying exam happens in January of the first year. It's just about your knowledge of core chemical engineering principles, and you're given a chemical engineering paper, and you have to do 1 week of independent analysis on it. So you don't work with anyone else. Like you just go through the paper on your own, you critique it, and then you prepare a 10-minute critique presentation, and then you get questioned on your presentation and related chemical engineering principles for 50 minutes by a panel of 3 faculty. And then about a week later, you get the results if you passed or not. We have a very high pass rate for this qualifying exam, and you're able to take it one more time. But the nice thing is that it happens really quickly, and it lets you dig right into research. So your next major milestone after that is the PhD proposal, where you actually start getting into a specific research plan, and that has both written and oral components. But it's nice that those two are separated because it really lets you dig into research, I think, a lot quicker since everything is front loaded like this. And then like the remainder, yeah, for other courses, besides the core courses, you have like 3 graduate minor electives that you can spread out across 5 years. And you have 1 CHB elective, so like 1 chemical engineering elective. So not a whole lot of courses to be juggling on top of research. Teaching is not tied to funding within the department. So you have to TA even if you have external fellowships, a minimum of 3 semesters, and then the maximum is 4 semesters. And internships. This is something that actually makes Georgia Tech pretty different too, in the sense that internships are actually like, I wouldn't say that like everyone does an internship, but they're not uncommon either. And they're common enough that we actually have a formal graduate internship program set up now through Georgia Tech. It's not something weird, like you have to take a leave of absence for a semester to go do your internship, but there's actually like a way that it's formally listed on your transcript and you get credits for it and things like that. So to give you a recap, the degree structure, advisor selection, you get flexibility, it happens pretty quickly. And then after that, the main things are that your core courses and qualifying exam are front loaded. It's intense during the movement, but I think it really helps build a sense of community, especially between the graduate students that you enter with. And it's good that they pass by quickly because that helps you focus on research, which is really like what you go to grad school to do. You're required to TA 3 times. And if you're interested, it depends on the field, but grad internships are definitely possible and they're not unusual. So with that, I guess I'll conclude the formal presentation and I'll give you some contact info in case there's questions that you maybe want to ask one-on-one. So you can either ask me as a fellow alum / recent graduate. So there's my Georgia Tech email address. And then I also still actively check my University of Minnesota email address. So you can use whatever you find easier. And then for our graduate studies, we have our Associate Chair of Graduate Studies, Dr. Martha Grover, and our Graduate Academic Advisor, Janice Watley. And you can find their contact information through the Georgia Tech Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering website. So with that, I'd be happy to take any further questions or like go back over anything.
All right, looks like there aren't really a lot of questions. Is there anything else you had, Shun?
No, I think that was about it. So
All right, well, thanks for stopping in. I mean, this is definitely useful information. We'll get this recorded and posted, and hopefully share this information with the rest of the student chapter. So yeah, thank you
yeah.
very much.
Yeah, and just I guess I will say one other thing. Like I know that, well, actually, Siddharth, I don't know if are you a senior right now or
No, I'm a junior.
you're a junior? Okay. Well, I mean, like it still goes that like if you know of anyone who's applying to Georgia Tech right now or just applying to grad school in general, I'd be more than happy to talk with them one on one and actually like give them any advice or like look at statements, things like that for them. So,
Thanks for the offer.
yep.
I know you mentioned GRE wasn't required for Georgia Tech, but did you still take it when you said you applied for, because you applied for
I
other
believe
program?
that Georgia Tech, the GRE was required when I applied. We dropped it this year specifically out of both concerns for like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also because like it's probably hard to like properly take it under the current circumstances.
Mm-hmm.